Officials in Gaza say Israeli troops have shot and killed a Palestinian protester on the territory's border with Israel. At least 170 others are said to have been injured during another day of demonstrations along the boundary fence. There have been protests every Friday for several weeks.
Meantime, the tensions and rhetoric are ratcheting up in the Middle East in the wake of President Trump's decision to pull out of the Iran nuclear deal. Violence along the Gaza border between Palestinians and Israeli soldiers escalating, and Iran is now threatening to restart its nuclear program on a, quote, industrial scale. Also, just today, the commander of Iranian Army Ground Force said Israel's security is further threatened by the U.S. decisions to withdraw from the nuclear pact. We have team coverage on the unfolding situation. CNN Global Affairs correspondent Elise Labott live in Jerusalem and senior international correspondent Frederick Pleiken in Tehran. Good to see you both. So, Elise, you first. Hundreds have been injured and a Palestinian killed in protests along the Israeli-Gaza border in recent days. Israel and Iran are trading blows across the Syrian border, firing missiles at each other. And the new U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem is set to open on Monday. Could the controversial move, plus increasing tensions in the region, spark even more violence? It's a lot at once.
It certainly is, Fred. I mean, look, you have a couple of things all coming together, as you said, the situation in Gaza, the situation with Iran and Israel for the first time trading direct fire last week in Syria, and now this controversial move of the embassy opening. And you also have the beginning of Ramadan starting early this week. So certainly a lot of concern that the heightened tensions will escalate. In Gaza, there's been some protests for about 7 weeks now. Friday really came to a head with those protesters, one killed, several hundred injured. There is a big concern right now that a lot of protesters are calling for breaching the wall on Monday. Certainly Israel is ready for that. And when it comes to Iran, again, you know, those tensions have been really escalating over the last several weeks. But with President Trump pulling out of the Iran deal, now Israel really kind of sees Iran as weakened. Their currency is really plummeting. So I think from Israel's perspective, this is really a prime opportunity to go after what they've been concerned about for some time, which is Iran's growing military presence in Syria. So certainly Israel is fighting all of this at once. But I will say that opening of the embassy, the U.S. support, and even, you know, some Arab support. You saw the Bahraini foreign minister tweeting the other day in support of Israel's self-defense. I think all that support is really giving them the confidence that they feel that they need to fight back against Iran at this time.
And then is there a way to generalize, you know, how the president's decision, you know, to leave the Iran deal might be received there in Israel?
Well, listen, I think that, you know, when you talk to U.S. officials, they say, you know, previous administrations, in particular, they cite the Obama administration, has been very tough on Israel, thinking that if they could, you know, put the squeeze on Israel for settlements or something else, that would motivate Israel to, you know, cooperate and make concessions to the Palestinians. This administration clearly has a different take and has been really in lockstep with Israel, not only on Iran, but on the Palestinian issue and on Jerusalem. So again, I think it's what the U.S. hopes, and I think Israeli officials do say that that support, that knowing that the U.S. really has Israel's back no matter what, and trying to see everything from Israel's perspective, is giving Israel the kind of confidence that it needs, and hopefully that will be enough to make some concessions to the Palestinians. I will say, though, that, you know, all of this support, and certainly the support of Arabs, is taking a little bit of the oxygen away from this embassy move. And I think that, you know, the U.S. officials certainly expected more outrage from the Arab world. So I think there will certainly be a lot of protests tomorrow, but I don't think that the Israelis are expecting the kind of serious violence that they might have.
All right, Elise, let's get to Fred Pleiken now in Tehran. So, Fred, Iran has reacted to the news of the U.S. pullout with threats of a stepped-up nuclear program, but that's really not all. A new photo shows Iran's supreme leader spotted at a book fair checking out a Farsi edition of Michael Wolff's book, Fire and Fury, inside the Trump White House. He shared the picture himself on Instagram. So could there be a real danger behind these threats, these blusters? What does this mean? What's the symbolism even with that book reading?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly has a lot of symbolism that he would be pictured with that specific book. And clearly, the supreme leader of Iran has been lashing out at President Trump throughout the entire course of this week. I mean, Elise was just alluding to it. This has been a big week if you're here in Iran as well. First of all, the U.S. pulling out of the nuclear agreement, then that altercation that happened in the Golan Heights and on Syrian territory, but especially the U.S. pulling out of the nuclear agreement. I mean, it's just one thing to be pictured there reading Fire and Fury, but the supreme leader of Iran also said earlier this week that President Trump's corpse would be fodder for worms while the Islamic Republic of Iran would still stand. So some serious fiery language. And I think one of the interesting things is, while the Iranians have actually not yet said that they were part of that altercation that took place in Syria with those two sides firing rockets at each other, those two issues do seriously seem to be intertwined for the Iranians. You were mentioning that Iranian commander, the general, who was saying that Israel's security would be at peril with the U.S. pulling out of the nuclear agreement. I want to read part of the statement that he said. He said the treatment of the nuclear deal by Trump will fail to produce the results desired by the Zionists, obviously referring to the Israelis, and would rather speed up the annihilation of the usurper regime. So if anybody thought that the Iranians were going to back down, that certainly doesn't seem to be happening. At the same time, though, Frederica, I think it's really important to point out that there is still a lot of diplomacy going on as well. The Iranians say they do want to salvage the nuclear agreement. The foreign minister of Iran is going to go around to Russia, China, to the European countries to see if they can find some way forward to preserve the agreement without the United States actually being in it. That's going to be very difficult. But as you said, if that fails, the Iranians say they can start up their nuclear program again very, very quickly, and that there will be no restrictions on it, Frederica.
Fred Bleiken, Elise Labott, thanks to both of you. Appreciate it.